Hello and welcome to our special US presidential inauguration coverage. I'm Stan Grant. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. has today been sworn in as America's 46th president. It closes the book on the Trump years, but there still may yet be a sequel. President Biden has described America as a broken country and committed himself to restoring leadership at home and abroad. It won't be easy. Despite his call for unity, the inauguration took place in Washington, D.C. in military lockdown. This was an historic moment with Kamala Devi Harris sworn in as the first woman to become vice president. She is also the first person of South Asian descent and the first black woman to ever hold America's second highest office. But now it's down to business. During his inauguration address, Mr. Biden declared democracy has prevailed, calling on all Americans to put aside their divisions and come together to address the challenges facing them all, including the pandemic, economic recovery, and the scourge of racism that has polarized America for generations.
Speaker Pelosi, Leader Schumer, Leader McConnell, Vice President Pence, and my distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. This is America's day. This is democracy's day, a day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. Through a crucible for the ages, America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy. The people, the will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries. As we look ahead in our uniquely American way, restless, bold, optimistic, and set our sights on the nation we know we can be and we must be. I thank my predecessors of both parties for their presence here today. I thank them from the bottom of my heart. And I know the resilience of our Constitution and the strength of our nation, as does President Carter, who I spoke with last night, who cannot be with us today, but whom we salute for his lifetime in service. I've just taken the sacred oath each of those patriots have taken, the oath first sworn by George Washington. But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us, on we, the people, who seek a more perfect union. This is a great nation. We are good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far, but we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now. Once-in-a-century virus that silently stalks the country. It's taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in all of World War II. Millions of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. A cry for survival comes from the planet itself, a cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. In another January, on New Year's Day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, and I quote, "If my name ever goes down into history, it'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Uniting to fight the foes we face: anger, resentment and hatred, extremism, lawlessness, violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome the deadly virus. We can reward work and rebuild the middle class and make health care secure for all. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart. The battle is perennial, and victory is never assured. Through Civil War, the Great Depression, World War, 9/11, through struggle, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed. In each of these moments, enough of us have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. History, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower the temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury. No progress, only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge, and unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America when we've acted together. And so today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh, all of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again, hear one another, see one another, show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war. And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured. My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the great mall where Dr. King spoke of his dream. Here we stand where 108 years ago, at another inaugural, thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote. And today, we mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. Here we stand, across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen. It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever. To all those who supported our campaign, I'm humbled by the faith you've placed in us. To all those who did not support us, let me say this. Hear me out as we move forward. Take a measure of me and my heart. And if you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably within the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's greatest strength. Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans. All Americans. And I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did. Many centuries ago, St. Augustine, a saint of my church, wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love. Defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? I think we know. Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit. And each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies. Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation. I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand, like my dad, they lay at bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering, can I keep my health care? Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their families, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war that pits red against blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, and if We're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand. There are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be. This is what we do for one another. And if we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. And we can still disagree. My fellow Americans, in the work ahead of us, we're going to need each other. We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. One nation. And I promise you this, as the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. We will get through this together. Together. Look, folks, all my colleagues I serve with in the House and the Senate up here, we all understand the world is watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges. And we'll lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll be a strong and trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through so much in this nation. And in my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all of those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic. Those 400,000 fellow Americans, moms, dads, husbands, wives, sons, daughters, friends, neighbors, and co-workers. We'll honor them by becoming the people and the nation we know we can and should be. So I ask you, let's say a silent prayer for those who've lost their lives and those left behind, and for our country. Amen. Folks, this is a time of testing. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus, growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up, all of us? It's time for boldness, for there's so much to do. And this is certain. I promise you, we will be judged, you and I, by how we resolve these cascading crises of our era. We will rise to the occasion is the question. Will we master this rare and difficult hour? Will we meet our obligations and pass along a new and better world to our children? I believe we must. I'm sure you do as well. I believe we will. And when we do, we'll write the next great chapter in the history of the United States of America, the American story. A story that might sound something like a song that means a lot to me. It's called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, at least for me, and it goes like this. The work and prayers of century have brought us to this day. What shall be our legacy? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through, America, America, I gave my best to you. Let's us add our own work and prayers to the unfolding story of our great nation. If we do this, then when our days are through, our children and our children's children will say of us, they gave their best, they did their duty, they healed a broken land. My fellow Americans, I close the day where I began, with the sacred oath. Before God and all of you, I give you my word. I will always level with you. I will defend the Constitution. I'll defend our democracy. I'll defend America. And I'll give all of you, keep everything I do in your service, thinking not of power, but of possibilities, not of personal interest, but the public good. And together we shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness, a story of decency and dignity, love and healing, greatness and goodness. May this be the story that guides us, the story that inspires us, and the story that tells ages yet to come that we answered the call of history. We met the moment. Democracy and hope, truth and justice did not die on our watch but thrived. That America secured liberty at home and stood once again as a beacon to the world. That is what we owe our forebears, one another, and generation to follow. So, with purpose and resolve, we turn to those tasks of our time, sustained by faith, driven by conviction, and devoted to one another and the country we love with all our hearts. May God bless America, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, America.
To lead not by the example of power, but by the power of example. That was the big message, the takeaway from that speech, a speech that really laid it on the line, Joe Biden talking about America as a broken nation. Well, to discuss the state of American politics and the challenges facing President Biden and his new administration, I'm joined by US political expert and someone with an encyclopedic knowledge of inaugural, Stephen Lucy. Good to have you with us, Stephen.
Thanks, Dan. Good to be with you.
How does this compare? There was a lot of Lincoln, there was a bit of Kennedy. He's at a real hinge point in history. What did you take away from that, knowing full well that you could probably recite half the inaugural speeches that have been given?
Well, I think Frank Luntz, the Republican pollster, very able Republican pollster, put it best, where he simply described President Biden's inaugural address as powerful. And it was. It was measured, it was very honest, and the words were embraced by the president. He clearly believed what he was saying, so it was a very honest address. And yes, there was more than a hint of Lincoln's second inaugural in March of 1865. And by the way, as you're aware, Stan, that was the last occasion on which the United States military was obliged to lock Washington down because of the threat to the president.
And Lincoln, of course, avoided triumphalism. He could have because the war was won.
Yes.
All of the troops were in place, but he spoke about finishing this work we are in, binding up our wounds. We're hearing this here. Biden saying, if you didn't vote for me, listen to what is in my heart. Unity. It wasn't the triumphal we have won, Trump is vanquished. It was far from that.
Precisely, and there is more than a suggestion of Lincoln in that. Lincoln's second inaugural, Union forces, the Army and the Navy, were victorious everywhere. But he looked to binding up the nation's wounds, and he looked particularly to the defeated South. And there's no question that President Biden was holding out the olive branch to people who had supported Donald Trump and saying, if you disagree with me, that's fine, but we should be listening to each other. And there was an element of healing in this speech, and the days ahead are going to be critical, but I think as as we've seen since the election, President Biden has been at pains to be in the centre ground and receptive to arguments from across the spectrum.
Will they listen, Stephen? This is going to be critical. More than 70 million people voted for Donald Trump. If you look at the opinion polls, he's still at around 80% amongst Republicans. Joe Biden did not mince his words here. He called things out by name. White supremacy, terrorism. You know, he is really calling this out. Are people going to hear?
I believe they will over time, once they look at the actions of the new administration, the direction in which the new administration is heading. And in that respect, the Congress has got a critical role to play, particularly Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the new Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. In the days ahead, Senator Schumer and the outgoing Majority Leader Republican Senator Mitch McConnell are going to have to agree on a power sharing arrangement, because 50-50 in the Senate with the Vice President breaking a deadlock is not going to work every time. There's going to have to be some concessions on both sides to get committees working, to get legislation working, to get appointments validated and so on and so forth. So I think the tone of the speech is excellent, and in particular for Australia, I noticed the President mentioned allies, the importance of allies and repairing allies. But overwhelmingly, his focus will be domestic in the immediate sense, and I think Congress has got an important role to play there. Both sides, actually, both sides.
It's interesting you mentioned Mitch McConnell, because there is still pending this trial in the Senate, the impeachment trial of Donald Trump, and whether in fact he would be convicted. Now, that's going to overshadow, when that happens, Biden's agenda and the first 100 days. What does Mitch McConnell do? This is a chance for the Republican Party to remake itself, but it comes with enormous potential cost.
Absolutely, there are great risks here of a schism in the party, and we're seeing that already very clearly. The Bush family, for example, President Bush 43, has made very clear his position. The Democrats won the election. He was there to welcome the new president, as was Vice President Pence. So you have the mainstream of the Republican Party, the traditional Republican Party, let's say the Reagan Republicans, as contrasted with the Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley Republicans, who came very close to endorsing what was happening in the Capitol, which was an act of domestic terrorism. There's no question about that. So there needs to be a clear line drawn, which the President has drawn for Americans generally, but within the Republican Party there's going to need to be some soul searching.
Now, we know that inaugurals are about the performance as well, they're about entertainment as well. Now, there was a song that caught my eye. We're going to play a little bit of this. It's Jennifer Lopez. Now, she's singing This Land Is My Land, with as well segueing into God Bless America. There's something to talk about here. Let's have a little listen to this.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me, you and me. Oh, America, America, God shed His grace on thee and crowned thy.
Did have a bit of a chuckle watching that, of course, because Woody Guthrie, who wrote This Land Is Your Land, was a declared socialist, if not a communist, who wrote the song as a protest against God Bless America, because this was the voice of the left behind. When you put the two songs together, it sort of goes to what W.E.B. Du Bois, the great African-American scholar, called the double consciousness of America, the better angels and the dark reality, doesn't it?
No question. And I always liked Scott Fitzgerald's observation. He wrote an essay in the Saturday Evening Post in 1929 called The Swimmers, and he talked about the differences between the European countries, such as England being a land, France being a country, I'm paraphrasing there, but the United States being an idea. And the idea is extraordinary in its adaptability and its malleability in drawing from the founding documents and in drawing from American history, as the President was doing today. And the best American presidents do that routinely in their speeches. Think of Jack Kennedy and Ronald Reagan, think of FDR, and so on.
Morning in America, light
Yes.
on the hill, ask
Yes.
not what your country will do for you, but what you can do fit for your country. Can the idea survive, Stephen? Because America has been battered. 2 decades of war, terrorism, financial crash, political populism. It is divided. China is looming as not just a threat, but an authoritarian superpower to usurp the United States as the most powerful economy in the world. We've got a minute or so left, but can that idea of America that you're talking about, the mashup of God bless America and this land of your land, endure?
I believe it can, and I take my cue from the decisions that the President has already announced by way of his cabinet. And he is seeking to reach out. You look at Janet Yellen in Treasury for the markets, you look at Anthony Blinken in State, you're looking at people who are reasoned and reasonable people, and I think that's going to result in policies which we can all support.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, a new political era has certainly begun in America. The formalities are out of the way. President Biden has got straight to work as he attempts to heal a divided nation, confronting the reality of a global pandemic and generations of social and racial division. I'm Stan Grant. Thanks again for joining us on this historic day. Bye for now.